Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today we're doing a bit of a breaking news segment. Although breaking might be a little bit extreme. I mean, this is from 2 days ago, so hardly breaking news, but like, next day is usually the best I can do, so a day later than that, it's semi-breaking news. We're going to be talking about 2 news stories. I know I usually do the news in the week in review, like I do a kind of roundup, but occasionally when there's slightly bigger things, I like to do a bit of a dedicated video around it, and today I'm going to be covering 2 specific things. One that happened like almost a week ago at this point, but because I didn't do a week in review this past week, I didn't get a chance to talk about it, and I've had people asking me to talk about it. And then 2 is the more breaking news one, which is Tabletop Tycoon acquiring Tiny Epic, acquiring the Gamelyn games. I guess I'm not entirely sure. They're acquiring the Tiny Epic games as well as other games in that series. I don't know if they're fully acquiring the entire Gamelyn games. I believe they are. But basically, the 2 pieces of news we have, and I'll talk about the headlines and then dive into them one at a time, is we have Tabletop Tycoon, which recently rebranded as Tycoon Games, and I do wonder why that is, because honestly, I think Tabletop Tycoon has a pretty decent ring to it, and I think Tycoon Games makes it sound more businessy, which is already a challenge that they have. They already have a bit of a negative perception in the general tabletop space. Longer conversation around Dan Yarrington, the owner, the various companies he's had along the way. There's been a lot of companies. I first backed like Alien Frontiers way back when, but they've had Game Salute, they've had, what was it, Ship Naked, I think was the company. They've had a whole host of companies. Starling Games, they acquired Victory Point, they've recently been doing distribution for, oh my gosh, they're just doing distribution for a few other companies, but they have Tabletop Tycoon, and they recently rebranded as Tycoon Games. I'm kind of going on a tangent at this point. And Tycoon Games acquired Gamelyn Games. That was the breaking news update that Gamelyn Games posted, sent out, and basically, they've been making games for a long time. They've done the Tiny Epic series, they've done the Heroes of Air, Land, and Sea. They've recently, over the past few years, started to work more with IP games, various like, Tiny Epic, Game of Thrones, things like that. And now that company is moving over to Tycoon Games, which is picking up, well actually before we dive into the full conversation around that piece, the other piece of news that we have is that Degenesis, the campaign from CMON as well as SMV, Degenesis Clan Wars, was cancelled. Fully cancelled, although supposedly, and I say supposedly because until those checks clear, it is supposedly they'll be issuing 100% refunds. Not just refunds less fees, 100% refunds for everything related to Degenesis Clan Wars, supposedly. Those are the 2 big headlines that we have. Again, one from 2 days ago, one from 5-6 days ago, however long it's been. Was it 5-6? Honestly, I feel like it's less than that. I think time just flies. Some degree of time ago that was recent, but not like far back. It's been more than a few days, and not so much that I haven't talked about it yet. That's the Degenesis story. So, let's talk about those a bit more in detail, one at a time. We'll first talk about the Tycoon Games, and then dive into Degenesis. I should also note, in both of these stories, I'm talking about this as Board Game Co., not in my capacity as a CMO of GameFound. That's particularly relevant because Degenesis was a game that was on GameFound. Tycoon Games has, well, they do both Kickstarter and GameFound, but like particularly relevant to some of the things that they have. They have a Blood Rage Valhalla coming up on GameFound, so they also use GameFound. In both capacities, I'm talking about this as Board Game Co., and in both capacities, I just don't have more information than what I'm talking about here. I don't have... it's always a tricky balance. If I had behind the scenes stuff that I couldn't talk about, I don't know if I'd talk about it at all. In both cases, I don't really have behind the scenes stuff to talk about to begin with, so what I can say is what I know. Anyways, with that said, let's talk about the Tycoon Games first. Tycoon Games takes Tiny Epic, that takes the Gamelyn Games brand or whatnot. They acquire Gamelyn Games. This is carrying off from a long line of acquisitions. I mean, even Everdell, their flagship product, their flagship game that Tycoon Games is known for at this point, that's a game that they acquired. They acquired it from the original owners of the game, and they've taken that and continued to branch out more and more, bringing you a whole ton of games, expansions, content, dual games, rebrandings. We have Tiny Epic, well, not Tiny Epic, I'm mixing my stories. We have Everdell, was it Silverfrost, Everdell Silverfrost, as well as Everdell Farshore, entirely two new entire games within their system. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Everdell Legacy at some point. Feels like a natural way to make more money off that game while also giving the people what they want. It's always a balance when you have like cash grabs. Cash grabs in general, to me a cash grab, I did a full video on this one time, but to me a cash grab is when the thing that you're making, you don't put the heart and soul into it, and you just rely on the fact that it will sell. So if you're making, just to give an example, if you are making Everdell Legacy, if you put love, care, thought, and attention into it, that to me personally is not a cash grab. That's you get to make money on a popular thing, and I, as a fan of Everdell, get to buy and enjoy that popular thing. So to me, the way they've continued to build on the Everdell universe doesn't feel like a cash grab to me personally, because I've liked most of what they've done. Everdell Duel, that wasn't for me. I didn't care enough about that one. But both Silverfrost and Farshore, I think, are fantastic additions to the line. I would happily play and buy Everdell Legacy. By the way, to be very clear, there's no Everdell Legacy that I know about. This is me just talking about the nature of continuing to expand upon a line, and as well as the concept of a cash grab. Whereas if you do make an Everdell Legacy, and you put bare minimum effort into it, and don't bother really trying to make a product that is anything other than, hey, people will buy it, so what do we care? That's a cash grab. And I say that because, again, even going back to CMON, when they continue to put out Zombicide year after year after year, people continued to buy them, people continued to go back. While some Zombicides didn't shine as much as I would like, others continued to do tremendously well. Like, Undead or Alive was fantastic. There are many, many Zombicides that have landed with people, and so to me, those things aren't cash grabs. So going back to an IP that is popular, to continue to make money on that IP while giving people what they want, I think that's just generally a win-win, as long as you do it right. Now that we've done a ridiculously long tangent about something that doesn't even exist, Everdell Legacy does not exist as far as I know about. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked if it was in development, because, hey, these things make sense. But as far as I know, there is no Everdell Legacy. Back to the conversation around Tycoon Games. So Tycoon Games, they have their flagship product is Everdell that they've acquired, but recently they've gone on a bit of a rampage as far as acquiring various games and or companies. They've acquired the Trailblazers line from Mariposa's game. They acquired Canvas from Road to Infamy, and then the most recent, that was like already a few months ago or whatnot. But the most recent one that came out, well, before the most recent one, was when they took over the a variety of games from CMON, who we'll be talking about later in the story, where they talked about where they got Blood Rage, I believe it was Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and Ankh. That was the Eric Lang trilogy, as well as Arcadia Quest and Starcadia Quest, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the 5 games that they picked up from CMON, as CMON has been selling off some of their IPs. Zombicide was picked up by Asmodee, but the rest of those were picked up by Tycoon Games. While CMON still has a lot of their IPs as well. They still have Cthulhu Death May Die. They still have, Massive Darkness. They still have, Marvel United, as well as a variety of others, but those are like their big name products that they still have under their umbrella, which means, to me, unless we hear about a sale of those, like if you hear about Cthulhu Death May Die, Marvel United, and Massive Darkness being sold, that to me is a big like end of CMON kind of conversation. As long as they haven't been sold, especially when they are easily worth money and could be sold, it makes me think that CMON is just really distilling what and how they've done things and changing up their entire model, hoping to be able to make it out of here. We'll see. This is optimism speaking. I have no idea. I'm still someone that hopes to see Storm Thunder one day. Anyways, with that said, back to Tycoon Games. So they acquired all of those from CMON, and now most recently they've acquired Gamelyn Games. I don't know what to make of all of this. I mean, Asmodee went on their own buying spree several years ago, and then they kind of slowed down, although I think supposedly they've been picking things up again. I mean, Zombicide represents their first dive into continuing to start up buying things again, as well as diving into crowdfunding at the same time. Like, they announced that they're going to go into crowdfunding, which is something that's almost insane to hear Asmodee going into crowdfunding, but we'll see what happens there. But in general, with Tycoon Games buying up all these various things, there's 2 different aspects to it. There's the personal feelings that some people have around Tycoon Games. Like, there are, again, this is a longer video that I'm not going to be going into. It's a longer conversation I'm not going into, but Dan Yerington, Tycoon Games, the long history he has certainly stepped on enough toes along the way that he has a lot of people who happily buy their games, and a lot of people who don't want to buy anything that Tycoon Games has picked up. I don't even know fully the entire reasons for it. I know some of them, but I don't know fully. They have their own history to an extent. And so separately, there's the conversation around whenever they pick something up, they have people who may no longer be interested in those products. If you look at the BGG page, if you look at the Board Game Geek news article on Tycoon Games picking up the Tiny Epic Game series, you see a lot of people who are just like, well, that means I'm never buying a Tiny Epic game again. They're not excited for what it can bring to life. They are done with the thing because Tycoon Games owns it. But then separately, if you look at, I mentioned Blood Rage Valhalla. Blood Rage Valhalla is a standalone game. Blood Rage 2, effectively, is a standalone game in the Blood Rage universe. They just put up a GameFound page for it recently, and it has like 10,000 followers already within a handful of days because people are incredibly excited about getting their hands on this game, on Blood Rage Valhalla. I'm a huge fan of Blood Rage. I will easily buy anything Blood Rage related because I love Blood Rage. I love Blood Rage. It has not continued to give me enjoyable gaming experiences, and more Blood Rage is very exciting. I mean, I know Eric Lang's been talking about Blood Rage 2 for like, it feels like 5 years by now. I don't know if it's been 5 years, but it feels like 5 years. And the fact that it's finally coming to life in some way, shape, or form, again, there goes that cash grab kind of conversation, or not. Like, what is this? What was this? Because I can tell you this much. This much I know for sure. Well, know is a relative term. This much I assume for sure. I assume that Tycoon Games didn't buy Blood Rage as an IP, and then within a month had a full game ready to go. That would probably be a very, very bad game, and I don't imagine we'd have Eric Lang's name on that cover. I imagine that would be Blood Rage Valhalla designed by somebody else entirely. The fact that we have Blood Rage Valhalla designed by Eric Lang makes me think that this was a product that was ready-ish to go. It makes me feel that by the time Tycoon Games got involved, this was something that was already going to happen at some point, and now it's happening because they moved over that finish line to some capacity. Again, maybe I'm just naive, but I feel that being able to acquire the IP and then within a month have Blood Rage Valhalla with Eric Lang's name on it ready to go just doesn't make sense to me otherwise. But there are a lot of people who are excited about that. Regardless of who the owner of the IP currently is, that game is going to sell a lot of copies because Blood Rage is very popular and people have been hungry for more Blood Rage for a very long time. The same is likely going to hold true for Rising Sun and Ankh 2. Probably Ankh to a lesser degree. I think that was always the least popular. It's still a great game, but that always was the least popular of the franchise. But all of those are going to very much have their audience, and I think the same is likely to be true for Gamelyn games and the universes they have created. Don't get me wrong, I think there are many people who have posted that they are not going to ever buy another Tiny Epic game, and I think that many of those people actually mean it. Many of those people mean it and probably will backtrack on it when the next thing that captures their interest goes up. And many more people don't care, don't know, and never will care or know. Something I'm always reminded of is how small this industry is, and yet how fractured it is at the same time. When you go to a convention and you see a game like that's rated a 6.4 and they're selling out, selling out completely and totally on the convention floor, and you get a reminder that the same people on Board Game Geek who would never buy a 6.4 game, there are hordes of people buying and enjoying those games. There are different audiences, from the people who buy Monopoly, from the people who go on Board Game Geek, from the people who own games, rate games, even on Board Game Geek. There's only a segment of the population that actually that marks their own collection as owned, that logs their plays. We are so fractured as far as the different types of people out there. I remember from a GameFound, I think there's a stat over on GameFound. This is like the one part as a GameFound rule. I believe the stat we have is 75% of backers never read a single update. Meaning 75% of people backing a campaign never read a single update on that campaign. And yet those of us who do read updates kind of mentally think to ourselves, well, everyone's reading the update. Everyone's reading all updates, or at least the important ones, right? But 75% of people on a campaign never read a single update. They back, they walk away, they come back later. This is so true, again, kind of going in circles with the same companies in this conversation, but I remember back when CMON had the whole Marvel Zombies shipping drama, if you looked at the number of comments added to the campaign, because people were losing their minds over the cost of shipping back then. I don't know if you remember this drama, but that, shipping was expensive and people were not happy about it. Now, shipping during that time was going up with everyone, but CMON had arguably the most expensive shipping at the time in a way that did not look good. And if you look at the number of comments on the Kickstarter page at the time for Marvel Zombies, the number of backers relative to the new comments that were showing up, it was a minuscule amount. Even if you assume that every new comment was from a new user, every comment was a unique user that was added to the campaign from the end of the campaign to the drama, it was still a fraction of the number of people who actually backed the game. Most people don't know or involve themselves with all the drama going on. And so the whole Tycoon Games aspect of them owning these IPs, yes, there will be people who they lose along the way, but it won't majorly shift things up one way or the other. And additionally, there's always a lot of people, myself included, I'm someone who's happy to take a moral stand of, I don't like that company, I won't buy that game. But I do have lines within that. I don't like that company, so I will be less in a rush to buy that game. It's probably my own personal moral line most of the time. It depends on what you've done, obviously. There's always going to be a line in the sand. But if I don't like a company, but they haven't crossed a line where I refuse to engage with them, which is most of the time is going to be what it is, then I'll be like, okay, well, I won't seek out those games that you're putting out. But Blood Rage Valhalla, Blood Rage Valhalla, like, I like Blood Rage. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people who fall into that category as well. Past that, from a more business side, from less of a personal, people's opinions around Tycoon games, from more of a business side of things, I think that I don't know what this means. Sometimes I do think I'm a little bit naive. I don't think I'm super naive. I think I'm a little bit naive. I sit there and I often judge very favorably. I look for the most favorable outcome of how I can interpret things. For a long time with CMON, I was always like, they're doing fine. They're picking up other people's IPs. Like, you don't buy another IP unless you're doing fine. You don't take up someone else's game to sell when you can sell your own games unless you're doing fine. I said that for a long time, and clearly CMON is not doing fine. I'm still optimistic that I think we'll see things, but they're definitely not doing fine. Similarly with Tabletop Tycoon, in my head, in my mind, I think, hey, look at all these acquisitions. This is clearly a company that's continuously reinvesting, that's trying to strengthen its position within the industry, and hopefully they're doing so responsibly. Hopefully they're not overcommitting themselves and stretching too far. Hopefully they're going to just try to do with these games. They've identified a bunch of popular games. Honestly, Trailblazer seems like the odd man out there. Like, it's popular, but it's not the same level of popular of Canvas or the Tiny Epic series or those like that series of games, the Eric Lang trilogy, as well as Arcadia Quest and Arcadia Quest. So, like, Trailblazer seems like the odd one out. Don't know how that happened. Again, popular game, but not different levels. But buying things like Canvas, like the Tiny Epic games, like the Eric Lang, and then taking those and doing the same thing with those that they did with Everdell. Just picking these flagship products that clearly have an audience and strengthening them, and then continuing to put out more content around those games, which some people will love and be thrilled with, and others will call cash grab and hate the concept of. And both will exist, but as long as people buy, that audience exists, of audience of people who are hopefully happy with the games they are buying. And if you're just buying them and you're not happy about it, if you buy a game because you feel you have to, but you never really play it, and then a year later there's another Blood Rage game, and you're like, I never even played Blood Rage Valhalla, what am I doing? Then maybe it's time to slow down. It's not Tabletop Tycoon's Tycoon games. It's not Tycoon's game's fault when they do that. We have to have some degree of self-control and some degree of personal accountability. And don't get me wrong, I'm saying that as somebody with the FOMO. I'm saying that as somebody who has bought many games and given them dozens and dozens of plays, and I've bought many games and played it once before the next iteration came out and realized I might have paid a $200 cost per play for that Kickstarter all in. I think from a business stance, it's probably good for Tycoon games. I keep saying Tabletop Tycoon. For Tycoon games, it's probably good. I hope this doesn't represent anything problematic. I don't think there's any malintent, but it is also possible that you can see companies try to grow too fast, grow too far, overextend themselves, and have problems. I'm not worried about that, but as I mentioned 2 minutes ago, I tend to be optimistic in the way I view these things and the directions I think they'll go. Hopefully my optimism here is not misplaced, because I don't want, regardless of your feelings for Tycoon games or not, I don't want anyone who has backed any of their products or is a customer of theirs or any of their employees or even Dan himself, I don't want anyone to have any degree of negative fallout in any capacity at any time in any way. And so I hope things go well, because the alternative is negative fallout for a lot of people. And that's kind of our Tycoon games segment over here. Didn't realize it would be as long as it was, but I guess I rambled. I don't know if the Degenesis segment will be as long as that, but we'll see, because I can ramble. Degenesis Clan Wars canceled by CMON. They had a statement, which I will link to their post down below. I will not be reading it verbatim. SMV released their own statement as well. But let me give you the kind of bare knucklebones is the wrong terminology. The bare bones. Let me give you the bare, I think I just played Mesopotamia, and that had knucklebones, and that's in my head for some reason. The bare bones kind of distilled summary of the post is that Degenesis Clan Wars is a game project set in the Degenesis IP, which is from SMV, which I can't remember what that stands for, but from SMV. It was a joint collaboration with the companies of their game and CMON bringing it to life with all the production and all the CMON stuff that they typically do. That was the goal of this project. It takes the Degenesis IP, throws some mechanics in there, and then you have a game. That's the game is not really important here. The fact that there was a game is important. This game, which was honestly one of the first times that CMON has done something like this in terms of the type, like they usually do massive IPs or their own games. I've never really seen them, at least I don't think I've seen them do something like this until now. It felt like an odd project for them, but nonetheless, they did the project. I would say the funding total makes me think it was an odd project. Like, it did like a few $100,000, which is one of the lowest CMON projects I've seen. Rivaled possibly only by Mordred. Like, Mordred was that the CMON one? Like, so generally CMON, are guaranteed to cross 500,000 and usually will hit 1 million, and then on their big IPs they'll hit like, you know, anywhere from 2 to 5 million. That's usually what we see. So anything that's under $500,000 is like weird for me. But that said, Degenesis was under $500,000, and now they have an update on the campaign. There hasn't been an update, I want to say, for 4 months maybe. I want to say 4 months ago was the last update. They have a new update saying, hey, we are shutting down the campaign. The reasons, and again, I'm giving you cliff notes over here, full update link down below. The reasons are because effectively they say that SMV who has already been paid, like, you know, whatever degree of money that they're supposed to get, they are asking and insisting for more money, and they are unable to reach a consensus or something. And according to the update, which is only from CMON's point of view, according to the update, CMON says they have fulfilled all their contractual obligations and they cannot come to resolution, and so they're effectively shutting down and canceling the campaign because SMV is canceling the contract. They kind of just effectively blame SMV. They put all the blame on SMV's doorstop. 100% full stop, all the blame is on SMV. Nothing about the update in any way, to me, implies any degree of personal accountability. Not that I know if there should be, although we will get to SMV's statement back in a second, as well as my personal peanut gallery opinion. So, that was CMON's statement. Then we get to SMV's statement, where SMV says, hey, this is kind of a shock to us. Like, they don't really say anything's not true. They say it was a shock to us, and, you know, CMON, we disagree with the prescription. I probably should have pulled up the full update. They say something along the lines of we're disappointed to see this update laying blame on our feet, something along those lines. Because there wasn't really a disavowalment, which is important as far as this chain events. In that SMV statement, they confirm that they canceled the project. They do say that because, you know, there was a lack of communication on CMON's side. They say that they were anxious about the project. They're trying to get it done. They get something out of their hands. They feel accountable to their community, but they're working with CMON's timeline, and therefore there was a lot of lack of communication, and ultimately they did cancel the project, and that's kind of what their update seems to say, which means they didn't necessarily disagree with anything CMON said. They did add their own aspect of delays in communication, and then we're disappointed to see, like, we didn't know this update was coming that was going to blame us for everything. And they say there'll be a further update coming soon. Again, the way that's phrased is important here, because I don't know who you are watching this at the moment, and I don't know what your thoughts are on CMON or SMV. What I will say is I'm a fan of CMON. I've been a fan of CMON for a long time. I am not unaware of their current situation. I think you'd have to be really digging your head into the sand there to not be what's the thing, who puts what's the animal that puts their head in the sand? Whatever it is. Ostrich? Is it ostriches who dig their heads in the sand? Anyways, point is, I'm not unaware of CMON's current financial state, or not financial state, the current optics of their financial state. When I read that update, from a personal standpoint, it certainly looked like all the words were said that would blame SMV and would make it seem like SMV. Oh, and then I said this earlier, but 100% refunds given to everyone, but based on, there's a delay attached to that. 100% refunds being given to everyone with a delay on some degree of resolution of the legal proceedings, which again means until they actually go out, it's a statement and not a guarantee. The statement certainly looks like SMV is at fault, with the obvious acknowledgement of two things. One, it's being told from CMON's point of view, and two, CMON does have a current situation, or a series of situations, which makes them not the most reliable narrator at the moment. And that's a combination of several things, all of which don't necessarily cause an issue on their own, but when added together, it makes you look at the statement with a degree of raised eyebrow. The fact that this whole thing happened with Final Frontier, where Final Frontier went down, blaming CMON on the way down. There was a statement put out later on that. I don't know how many of you caught that, but there was a statement put out saying that basically the amount was like something like $60,000. Like it was a $60,000 check that CMON hadn't paid yet for work not done yet. So Final Frontier blames CMON. CMON did later say, like, hey, by the way, that's $60,000, and they didn't actually deliver, so I'm not sure what the situation was. Also, Final Frontier was going down while while having millions of dollars in backer funds, so it does, to me on the outside, it does feel like Final Frontier was trying to blame CMON over something that they probably were upset about and probably had reason to be upset about, but probably wasn't CMON being the result of why Final Frontier went down. But when you have that, when you have all the current issues going on with CMON, and then you have this current situation, you could just look at the statement blanket face value and say, oh, SMV's at fault, they are the issue, and that's it. but you have to take it with a grain of salt because of everything going on, because they had this recent snafu with Final Frontier games. You have to take it all into consideration. And there are many backers who are in the comments blaming SMV, and there are many backers going, oh yeah, come on, CMON, we it's very obvious what's going on here and that you're just trying to blame them. But then the interesting thing on the other side of things is you have to take into account all sides of things, because on the SMV side, their community, people who know them, and I am not as well versed in these issues, but if you look at their side of things, there are people who talk about how SMV, they also have track records and consistent problems, and I had a whole issue recently where they let a whole bunch of staff. I don't know the exact details, but look into their side of things too, because this isn't a case. This is not a case of CMON who has a bunch of issues with a company who doesn't have a bunch of issues, nor is it a case of CMON who is completely blameless with a company who has a lot of issues. Right now we have a case of two companies who both have their own drama and issues. And from my own between-the-lines reading of the statements, my guess, this is not said with any knowledge, my guess is that CMON probably wasn't as responsive as they possibly should have been. But SMV does confirm that they did cancel the contract and pull the plug on things. And so the shifting, the shifting of the lines of exactly where the blame should or shouldn't be, that part's not clear to me at all. And I don't know what level of blame CMON should or shouldn't have in the situation. But my guess is that they probably weren't as communicative. And the confirmed statement from both sides is that SMV did cancel the contract. Past that, read into it as you will. I think it sucks all around. I mean, I wasn't the backer of that game like that. I mentioned Degenesis didn't feel like a typical CMON game. And it didn't, especially in the sense that I didn't feel drawn into it. I didn't feel drawn into the game, the IP, the setting. None of that was for me. I like my typical CMON games, not the things... Well, not... I mean, if you branch out, I might like it, but in this case, I didn't. I didn't care for it. The game itself is fine. The gameplay is fine. But the rules, the setting, I didn't care about that at all. But, so I wasn't the backer of that one. So I don't feel any sense of personal loss of like, oh no, I won't get that game. There's a bunch of CMON games that I will be very sad if I don't get them. I mentioned Mordred. I want Mordred. God of War, even more so. There's a bunch of CMON outstanding titles that I do want. Degenesis wasn't. But there are a lot of people who did. There are a lot of people who are very excited about it. And I'm sad on behalf of those backers most of all. I'm also sad on behalf of the sheer amount of lost work that, regardless of SMV or, CMON, I don't know where the exact fault lines lie. But it's not fun to see it happen regardless. Any nervousness on SMV's part is completely understandable, especially with everything going on. I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone. I don't know enough to do so. But I do know enough to have doubt as to any clarity as to where those fingers should point. Those are our two pieces of news. A longer deep dive into it. I really don't do these deep dives when I do my news and week in review. My news and week in review is small little news blips, which is part of why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to actually talk a bit more about these two situations, about Tycoon games as well as Degenesis, to go into a bit more of the nuances, the ins and outs of them. And that's your little semi-breaking news video. We'll be back on Saturday with our regular news and week in review, where I'll probably loosely mention these two pieces, talk about this a full video for them, and then dive into whatever other things there are, because I'm sure there will be other things. And with that said, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Oh, and if you're making your way to the end of this video, and you did watch my Saturday video where I talked about being a little bit burnt out, know that right now I'm doing much better already, which I expected. I expected that part. This is a random tangent to those of you who made it all the way to the end of this video, and also watched Saturday's video. I'm busy. I'm overwhelmed right now, which still makes sense. Again, I expect to be that way all the way through the end of Gen Con, but there were just 2 days there. There were 2 days where I was just feeling the pressure way too much, and I'm already in a much better place. Turns out taking 5 days off and playing board games at Dice Tower East will do that for you. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I appreciate all of you being here, and as always, I hope you have a good one.